Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending when you're watching this class. Today we're going to have a little bit more of a focus. So, all right, folks, we're going to jump into this one of the most important lectures on the frameworks of this course, how we actually theorize technology, which is important. If we're going to ask questions like who benefits from this technology or why does this platform become dominant, we have to understand the lenses we're using. And today's lecture breaks down the four, like the slide says, not sports, but the four core theories: technological determinism, social construction of technology, actor-network theory, and critical theory. And we're going to expand on some other components as well, but that's kind of the focus for today. So buckle in and let's get to it, shall we? So, as talked about, how do we understand SCOT, ANT, critical theory, and technological determinism? How do we explain the relationship between society and technology? And this is what becomes really important for us, right? Now, we're going to start today with technological determinism, which, right, a question that begs tech drives us forward, period. Something to think about here, right? But let's start with the big one, as we said. This is that technological determinism, the idea that technology develops independently of society. And once a new tool or system is introduced, it reshapes the world in predetermined, unstoppable ways. In this view, technology acts on us, and we simply react. In the classic March of Progress story, fire, wheel, and steam engine, electricity, computer, AI, right? But here's the problem. That story ignores people, power, and it ignores context. Matthewman calls out this kind of thinking as both seductive and dangerous in the article you'll be reading. In Technology and Social Theory, right, he outlines how theories of the third machine age, where electronic and digital technologies dominate, often lean on determinist assumptions. For what example? Or for one example for you, we hear that society was fundamentally transformed because of computers, or that mobile phones made isolation worse. But Matthewman reminds us that technology doesn't just appear out of nowhere or determine change on its own. It's always embedded in economic systems, social practices, and institutional logics. He pushes us to think not just about the invention of technology, but about how it's taken up, modified, and even normalized. Why did we normalize Zoom and not GoToMeeting? Why was the Walkman a cultural icon while similar devices didn't take off? These aren't just technological questions. They're social questions. Who used it? Who had access to it? What did it mean? Matthewman draws on theorists like Frederick James and Paul Virilio to show how each stage of technological development, from steam to electricity to digital devices, was part of the broader political and economic shifts. He even cites McLuhan's famous line, "The medium is the message." And if you didn't know, as you'll see in another lecture, originally that was even misprinted to "the medium is the massage." I have the book right here, and it was actually kept, right? It's not the content that matters. It's the form of the technology and how it reshapes relationships, values, and sense. And here's the kicker. When you treat technology autonomous, or when you treat technology as autonomous, you stop asking the critical questions. Who built this? Who benefits? Who's left out? That's exactly why theories like SCOT, of the social construction of technology, actor-network theory, ANT, and critical theory exist to challenge determinism. They say, no, tech doesn't evolve on its own. It's always shaped by people, institutions, power dynamics, and culture. So when we look at Zoom, don't say it's just took over because of it's the best, right? Matthewman would ask you to consider its emergence as part of the larger socio-technical system. Platform affordances, corporate needs, pandemic responses, internet infrastructure, even shifting definitions of presence and productivity. These are all social choices, not inevitable outcomes. So, as it says in the slide, technology drives history forward. Progress seems natural, but removes human agency. Zoom didn't just happen, it was adopted. SCOT, ANT, critical theory, all push back on determinism. But we're going to go a little further with Matthewman. So, pulling out from what we just talked about, we're going to start looking at technology as systems, right? Zoom isn't just software, it's a system. Matthewman pushes us to stop thinking about technology as just a thing, a single device or app, and start seeing it as a system. A system is made up of tools, yeah, but also people, norms, infrastructure, behaviors, policies, and power dynamics. Technologies aren't isolated gadgets. They're woven into culture. They're artifacts, right? Let's take Zoom again. It's not just code. It's workplace etiquette, educational access, broadband privilege, camera performance and expectations, surveillance practices, and now emotional labor, all baked in. When technology takes root, it brings along its entourage. To borrow Matthewman's phrase, the platform becomes how we do school, how we do meetings, and even how we grieve or socialize. It's not neutral, and it's never just technical. So now let's bring in an eerie use of media examples here, right? So I don't know if you did or didn't catch it. I'm kind of a horror fan, but the 2020 film horror known as The Host, which was written, shot, and released entirely during the pandemic on Zoom. On the surface, it's a supernatural horror story about a group of friends holding a virtual seance that goes horribly wrong. But underneath that, it's a brilliant social commentary on the politics of digital embodiment. Each character and host becomes a kind of digital avatar, a curated box on a screen. Trust breaks down, authority collapses, disconnection kills, literally. And Zoom, the platform we were depending on for connection and safety, became the settings of danger and death. It's a metaphorical tech-mediated presence where you appear to be in the room, but you're vulnerable in ways that you can't fully control, right? This aligns with Matthewman's warning when we rely on digital platforms to mediate identity, safety, and community. We're not just using tech, we're participating in a system with embedded rules, power, and unintended consequences. The horror of host isn't just the demon, it's the realization that your webcam is the new haunted house, and your muted mic might mean no one hears you scream. So instead of asking, what does Zoom let us do? We should ask, what does Zoom make us do? And what does it make invisible? That's the Matthewman move, right? From gadget to system, from usage to meaning. And this is what we start asking, where you can see the world around you in these theories that we're discussing. So next, we're going to move to another fundamental theory, the social construction of technology. Tech meanings are socially negotiated. Zoom from niche tool to essential infrastructure. Key ideas, interpretive flexibility, stabilization, and closure. But let's jump into that, shall we? So we made Zoom what it is a good way to kind of think about this. The social construction of technology theory flips the script on technological determinism. Instead of saying technology shapes society, SCOT argues that society shapes technology. Technologies don't arrive with a set meaning. Their purpose, value, and widespread usage are all shaped by social groups, cultural practices, and historical context. So let's go back to Zoom, shall we? Keep kind of a common theme here. It wasn't invented in 2020. Its founder created it nearly a decade earlier, inspired by a very human problem, how to stay close to his long-distance girlfriend. Technically, it wasn't radically different from Skype or GoToMeeting, both of which had been around longer. But here's the SCOT point, the social construction of technology point. It wasn't the best tech that won. It was the one that became socially necessary and symbolically meaningful during a moment of crisis. When COVID hit, Zoom usability, low friction, and viral uptake by institutions like schools, employers, led to what Scott calls stabilization, where the tech becomes consistent in meaning and dominant in use. And now we've arguably at closure, alternatives like Skype and GoToMeeting have largely been forgotten. And Zoom is the verb. Hop on Zoom has replaced call me on Skype. So we see this huge shift in kind of constructual dynamics. I mentioned in a former lecture, I used to be in the sales world, and one of the biggest hurdles you'd face because of how it was framed and understanding like what we're hearing from Matthewman as well, is that Join.me was the origination of GoToMeeting and getting people on there. They were terrified that you were going to hack their system and having distrust. So things have shifted, yeah? So now let's look beyond Zoom, because Scott doesn't just apply to the apps. Thinking about modern electric vehicles, EVs, a big thing right now. One of the strangest things about early EVs, like Tesla's Model S, was that they were silent. They didn't have an engine sound. At first, this was seen as futuristic, but then people got uncomfortable. Pedestrians didn't hear them. Drivers felt a sense of detachment. So what happened? Well, software-generated engine noises were added back in. That's Scott. That's that social construction of technology. We, the users, socially changed what we had driving to feel like, or what we wanted driving to feel like. We had decades of meaning layered onto the sound of an engine. It symbolized power, speed, in some cases masculinity, danger, and presence. So the EV had to be re-socialized through artificial noise to meet our cultural expectations, right? Culture lag is a big impact on all of this. That's the interpretive flexibility at work, where different groups, automakers, regulators, drivers, attach different meanings to the silence versus sound. And once consensus is reached, like a low hum for safety, that's stabilization, y'all. Or take lane detection systems. My brother was just telling me that he had to repair this vehicle that he was thinking about selling because if he didn't have the lane detection system, he was going to lose substantial amounts of monetary resale value. The car that I drive doesn't have lane detection system. My wife's does, mine doesn't. And it's because now everyone has that expectation, right? So we take that lane detection system in modern cars. These features began as a safety add-on, but many drivers found them annoying and intrusive. Some turned them off. Some saw them as helpful reminders, while others viewed them as another step towards autonomous vehicles. That's the interpretive flexibility again. Different users negotiated what that technology meant to them. Only when regulatory bodies, insurance companies, and automakers aligned on its usefulness did it start to stabilize into a default car design. We may not be at closure yet, but we're moving towards it as the features become normalized, just like backup cameras with the idea of kind of closure and where they're normalized, right? Some folks, like myself when I was growing up, we do that big lean, right? I've like nowadays, my age self leaning back thinks about how it hurts my back. But I remember not even caring if I had a camera on some of my vehicles because I was like, you just look back. What, we can't look into a camera? Think about that. And you see this in media as well. Think of films like Her in 2013, Black Mirror episodes, or even the movie Upgrade in 2018. These stories don't just show tech. They show people struggling to define what tech is. In Her, the AI partner, a product, a fantasy, interpretive flexibility is baked into the pilot. Society has not stabilized the meaning of the sentient software. And that's where the tension lies. In Upgrade, the cybernetic implant mobility tool or parasitic form of control. That's the question SCOT can question again. And even now, we've seen some of the new CEOs talk about the idea that everyone's going to have a digital boyfriend or girlfriend that's going to plan their days. Some of the tech companies are discussing this now. So there's an individual, if you look it up right now, who says he won't stop talking to his AI girlfriend. And that's impacted his real life relationship. So how are we looking at what Her was in 2013 as to what Her is in 2025? Even trends in smart home tech, Alexa, Ring doorbell, Alexa, stop listening. Smart thing thermostats go through this cycle. Early adapters saw them as convenience. Privacy advocates viewed them as surveillance. Over time, norms shift. Maybe stabilization happens when Amazon builds these devices into the rental properties and apartment complexes. Eventually, closure sets in. You no longer question having an always on mic in your home. It just is, right? So SCOT isn't just about understanding where tech comes from. It's about understanding that we are co-creating what technology means through our choices, behaviors, and the cultural norms, and the impact of those who be seen as Luddites or have cultural lag. The next time you hear someone say, this is just the future, ask the SCOT question. Whose future? Built by whom? And what and for what purpose? So next we're going to move into another fundamental theory. This is the idea of the actor network theory, right? The mic, the mute button, and you are all a part of the same network. Actor network theory asks us to rethink who or what has agency in a given social system. It doesn't just look at human choices. It says non-human entities also act. Non-human entities also act. Apps, algorithms, infrastructure, screens, doors, thermostats. These all participate in shaping outcomes. As Crawford in 2020 reminds us, we live in systems where technological or technical artifacts don't just respond to our commands, they co-produce our reality. Thinking back to Zoom as this continual theme we're talking about, when you're in a Zoom room, who talks isn't just about personality. It's about who has the best connection, who remembers to unmute, who knows how to share their screen. The mute button isn't a passive tool. It actively regulates the flow of interaction. It determines silence. It enables discipline. And it even encodes hierarchy. Think about the differences between a professor with a control over a breakout room versus a student stuck on mute. Think about if you're in faculty meetings like I have been, and we have faculty who are online only and are zooming in, right? Those who have that status can do that. Those who are in person have to come in. But also, when the meeting starts, many times the hand raise function isn't even being looked at because people's expectations, those with culture lag, don't even think about the Zoom participants being there. How did that hierarchy impact that, right? So Ant would say, don't just study the people in the Zoom call, study the interface, the chat bot, the raise hand button, and how they work with humans to produce what counts as participation, authority, and disruption. Let's go a little bit further. I've given examples in this class already, but the app Life 360, the family tracking app, ASU gives you access to that immediately as a student. Interesting, right? Built in institutionally. But it also gives parents near constant GPS surveillance of their children. But the app is more than code. It acts. It nudges parents to monitor. It tells teens when they're speeding. It becomes a moral agent, reinforcing expectations of safety and control. In Ant terms, the child, the app, the phone battery, the alert ping, and the parent are co-actors in a network of surveillance, care, and sometimes even resentment. Or think of Roombas. I don't know if any of you bought them. I bought them early and they weren't even that intuitive, but now they're massive. Those robotic vacuums, right? They map your house, navigate the space, and adjust to obstacles. But they also change behavior. People clean up clutter before running them. They schedule household activities around them. And some even treat them like little pets with names, or like putting a dancing hula person on it, right? Putting googly eyes on it. In Ant, the Roomba isn't just a machine, it's a participant in it's a participant that reorganizes domestic life. And some people even name them, right? Crawford in 2020 expands this by showing how systems like AI surveillance tools generate patterns of action, even unintended ones. A facial recognition system trained on biased data isn't just reflecting prejudice, it's producing new forms of exclusion or false identification. It acts within the network, shaping outcomes in ways no individual designed alone. Crucially, Ant doesn't moralize. It doesn't ask, is this good or is this bad? It doesn't care who benefits us. That's critical theory's job. Ant wants us to map the connections, to show how agency is distributed across both the humans and the non-humans. It says social is not just people. It's assemblages of people and things all acting together. So when you're analyzing a new technology, whether it's ChatGPT, your writing process, a smart thermostat in your home, or a TikTok algorithm determining what you see, Ant asks these following questions that you should think about. What is the net? What is the network? Who and what are the actors? How does agency flow between them? It's not just about what you do with the tech. It's about what the tech also does with and to you. So let's move on to critical theory now, another component, right? So who benefits and who's being encoded into the system, right? Power isn't accidental, it's designed. This is the central question of critical theory. Who benefits and who is being encoded in the system? Especially as applied to technology. While Ant is focused on tracing connections and Scott explores how meaning is shaped by groups, critical theory gets political. It says, look harder. Technologies aren't neutral. They are built within systems of power and are often the purpose of maintaining them. Take predictive policing, where algorithms are used to forecast whether crime will occur. That sounds efficient until you realize the data it relies on reflects decades of raciality based on policing. So when algorithms predict more crime in Black and brown neighborhoods, it's not making a neutral forecast, it's reproducing historic inequality through software, right? If you've seen the Tom Cruise movie, right, even that gets questioned within it. But what about now? So as Steinbaum in 2019 argues to the context of the gig economy, this isn't a glitch, it's a feature. The erosion of labor productions in platforms like Uber and Amazon Amazon Flex isn't a byproduct of innovation, it's intentional design. Policy, app architecture, and legal categories like independent contractor are all aligned to protect capital and minimize accountability. The app interface isn't just delivering work, it's reshaping how labor is valued, or even devalued. And it's not just transportation or policing. Think of digital sex work economy. As you'll read in this class, as discussed by Easterbrook and Smith in 2022, platforms like OnlyFans market themselves as empowering, but they also exploit platform precarity. The visibility algorithm, income structures, and the content moderation are all coded with biases, including gender, race, and sexual politics. The platform benefits when creators are kept in constant competition for attention, stuck in a hustle mode with no safety net. It's another example of tech designed to extract, not uplift. Or look at facial recognition software as we've been discussing. Studies constantly show that it performs better on white males' faces than on Black, female, or trans faces. That's not because the tech isn't ready, it's because training data sets are biased. And there's no financial or legal pressure to fix that. Power shape who gets recognized and who gets misrecognized. Even something seemingly progressive as the EV infrastructure reveals structural inequalities. Who benefits from the rollout of electronic vehicle chargers? Typically wealthier, urban, and white communities. Low-income rural and urban neighborhoods often lack access, even though they disproportionately are affected by environmental harm. That's what critical theory helps us to see: whose future is being built and who's left out. There's been a few videos surfacing on TikTok recently of folks who did finally buy an EV pushed by a lot of the social media and etc., and didn't know that you have to pay to charge your car. They had thought that this would be incorporated, right? But they didn't know this. And why wouldn't have they known this? What information wasn't provided to them? Think about it from this critical lens. So critical theory asks you to interrogate: who is building this technology? Who gains financially, socially, and politically? Whose values and bodies are centered? And who's being exploited, excluded, or erased? It isn't enough to marvel at innovation. We have to read as a political project. As Foucault may say, every tool is a technique of power. Every tool is also a technique of power. Next, we're going to go to one that is not one of the core four, but we have an interesting idea of Californian ideology that you'll be reading about. Libertarian on top, corporate at the core, right? This isn't a grand theory like Ant or Scott, but it's a powerful mid-range critique. The Californian ideology coined by Barbrook and Cameron describes how Silicon Valley mixes libertarian individualism with corporate capitalism. It sells you freedom, create, connect, disrupt, while quietly centralizing control, extracting data, and resisting regulation. Think of how Life 360 markets itself as a tool for family safety, but behind the narrative is a surveillance infrastructure that disciplines behavior and profits from constant location tracking, right? Or how Instagram encourages authentic expression while its algorithm enforces norms of engagement, beauty, and consumption. The Californian ideology isn't just about tools, it's about belief systems baked into platforms. It's what lets founders call themselves revolutionaries while running monopolies. It's why empowerment in tech often looks like freedom to be exploited. We see this ideology play out in shows like The Social Dilemma and Black Mirror, where platforms claim to serve users but manipulate them for profit and control. Even AI tools, marked by democratic and open, often reinforce existing inequalities in access and voice. Underneath that shiny branding is a logic of data capitalism. The more you engage, the more they extract. That's the Californian ideology in action: selling disruption, delivering domination. But we're going to take this a little bit further in this kind of focused lecture, and we're going to discuss kind of a combination of Zoom versus GoToMeeting at a theoretical comparative level, right? Both Zoom and GoToMeeting were available before the pandemic, but only Zoom became the verb. Its intuitive design, ease of access, and viral institutional adoption helped it stabilize into the dominant platform. Scott explains through the interpretive flexibility, Zoom's meaning changed through user adaptation, or adaption, right? From niche conferencing tool to a social and educational lifeline. Its closure came as alternative platforms like GoToMeeting faded from the relevance. Ant sees the transformation differently, right? It maps how non-human actors, the mute button, breakout rooms, sharing screens, reshaped human behavior and interactional norms. Your very presence in a Zoom meeting is produced through an assemblage of software, bandwidth, and platform design. It's not just who speaks, but how speaking happens that's redistributed through the network. Also think about how priority moves. If you pin yourself at the top, no matter who's talking, you may be up top, but also even how voices are heard and locations. Who shares their screen? What are they sharing? Digital avatars are being built into it. More ways to think. Critical theory asks the power question: who profits from Zoom's rise? Its mass adoption, right, wasn't just about connection. It enabled new forms of managerial surveillance, workplace availability, and institutional dependency. The company monetized global crisis and redefined productivity through a tool marketed as neutral. There's a lot of good. There's tons of really interesting ways we can also take a feminist lens to Zoom, right? When you're doing qualitative data research, you don't have as many situations where women might be placed, or those in vulnerable positions might be placed in precarious situations, or you're able and feel less safe, or you may be able to conduct multiple interviews on a high ranged basis, one in Alabama, one in Texas, and one in New Zealand, right? So there's more ways to look at this from different lenses, and critical theory is just another one, and so is Ant. But in the end, GoToMeeting never stabilized socially or symbolically. Zoom did, because its technological meaning was socially constructed, networked into practice, and economically reinforced. And one of the other lenses I'm bringing a lot into this class is the idea of Foucauldian theory. So we're going to look at biopower and networked life. Foucault's concept of biopower shifts our focus from the overt discipline to the subtle management of life itself. Technology doesn't just monitor us, it defines what kinds of behaviors are acceptable, productive, or safe. Surveillance apps like Life360, don't just track movement, they create moral frameworks. Being trackable becomes part of being a good kid, while turning off location sharing suggests disobedience or risk or even infidelity in relationships. These tools don't just watch, they shape identity and the expectations. Biopower is evident in the Zoom proctoring, fitness trackers, and AI productivity dashboards. They don't just force behavior with violence, but nudge it through data visibility, algorithmic norms, and self-surveillance. You internalize the gaze, not because someone is always watching, but because the system has taught you to watch yourself. In Foucault's terms, this is the power that produces the subject, not just the disciplines the body. Networked life becomes space where living under constant observation becomes normalized, even moralized. It's even been going into the larger conversation that exists around the Gen Z stare. But I do want to also leave you with some thoughts from me. So, some thoughts from me is how do these theories help critique everyday technologies? How can you use these big four and some of the adjacent ones? Which frameworks resonate with your own experiences? And also remember, technology is never neutral. It always tells a story. So now that you've seen these four big theories side by side, determinism, SCOT, and critical, ask yourself the questions on this slide. And I look forward to having more of these breakout theoretical sessions with you. And I hope that you're able to kind of gain more complexity and understand the knowledge that is this entire system that we're discussing. And from there, I'm going to leave you, and I will see you in the next lecture.